July 2, 1920, a cold Boston night shattered by the thunderous crack of gunfire left a watchmaker and a shoemaker dead, and set two Italian immigrants on a path that would ignite a firestorm of protest across continents. Nicholas Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, both proud, outspoken anarchists, were arrested, tried, and condemned for murders many historians now agree they did not commit. Their story is a haunting portrait of fear, prejudice, and the fragile balance between law and justice. Born in the rugged hills of Sicily, Sacco arrived in America in 1901, carrying a toolbox and a fierce work ethic. He settled in the industrial heart of Boston's North End, a neighborhood pulsing with immigrant life, where he ran a modest watch repair shop that became a gathering spot for labor activists and radical thinkers. Vanzetti, a shoemaker from the same island, followed a year later, his eyes alight with revolutionary ideas and a belief that the American promise could be reshaped through collective action. Both men joined the local chapter of the Italian Workers' Society, an organization linked to the broader anarchist movement that, in the eyes of the establishment, threatened the very fabric of American order. The early 1920s were a time of turbulence. The First World War had just ended, the Red Scare was in full swing, and a wave of anti-immigrant sentiment surged through the nation. The Boston Police Department, under pressure to quell labor unrest, cultivated a reputation for heavy-handed tactics, often targeting foreigners whose voices challenged the status quo. In this climate, Sacco and Vanzetti's outspoken criticism of capitalism and their refusal to take the oath of allegiance to the United States painted them as prime suspects when the robbery and murder at the South Braintree train station occurred. On the evening of April 15, 1920, two armed men boarded a commuter train, demanding cash from the conductor. When the conductor resisted, gunfire erupted, killing the guard and the ticket collector, Frederick Farrar. The assailants fled with a modest sum, leaving a city rattled and a police force desperate for answers. Within days, Sacco and Vanzetti were arrested, not because of concrete forensic evidence, ballistics, fingerprints, or eyewitness identification, but because of their political affiliations and the testimony of a few dubious witnesses. The trial began on May 31, 1921, before a Boston Superior Court jury composed entirely of native-born Protestants, a stark contrast to the defendant's Italian Catholic background. The prosecution, led by the charismatic but uncompromising William J. McCarty, painted the two men as dangerous subversives, using their anarchist literature and foreign accents as de facto evidence of guilt. "They are not men of law, they are men of disorder," McCarty declared, his voice echoing through the courtroom. The defense, headed by the brilliant attorney Fred H. Wheeler, attempted to dismantle the narrative by highlighting the lack of physical evidence and the unreliability of the prosecution's witnesses. Key witnesses included a former gang member, Frederick G. Davis, who claimed to have seen Sacco near the crime scene, and an alleged accomplice, Celestino V. Michaels, who recanted his testimony under pressure. Both testimonies were riddled with inconsistencies, dates shifted, descriptions muddled, and alibis contradicted by railway records that placed Sacco in his workshop at the time of the robbery. Yet the jury, swayed by the era's xenophobic fervor and the media's sensationalist headlines, "The Anarchists Murdered Boston's Finest," returned a guilty verdict on July 14, 1921. The appeal process was a marathon of legal maneuverings that spanned 6 long years. The defense argued that the trial violated the 14th Amendment's guarantee of equal protection, pointing to the exclusion of Italian-American jurors and the inflammatory newspaper coverage that denied the defendants a fair trial. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court denied relief, citing insufficient new evidence and deeming the original proceedings fair and impartial. The case climbed to the United States Supreme Court, where, in 1926, Justice Oliver Warren's majority opinion affirmed the lower court's decisions, asserting that the trial had adhered to due process despite the surrounding controversy. Public outcry intensified as the world watched. In Italy, the fascist regime under Mussolini seized upon the case as propaganda, condemning the United States for judicial barbarism. In the Soviet Union, newspapers lauded Sacco and Vanzetti as martyrs of the proletariat. Intellectuals such as Albert Einstein, H.G. Wells, and Emma Goldman signed petitions demanding a new trial. Massive rallies filled Boston's Copley Square, and a petition with over 2 million signatures was presented to Governor Alvin T. Fuller, urging clemency. The final blow came on August 23, 1927, when the electric chair hissed to life, and the two men were executed side by side. Their last moments were recorded in stark, haunting detail. Vanzetti's hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the crowd, his voice whispering, "In spite of everything, I love you." The execution was meant to silence dissent, yet it amplified it. The world's reaction was immediate. Newspapers worldwide ran front-page stories, and the phrase Sacco and Vanzetti entered the lexicon as a synonym for judicial miscarriage. Decades later, scientific advances and renewed scholarly scrutiny would revisit the case. In 1977, a Massachusetts state panel, chaired by former Governor Michael S. Dixon, re-examined the evidence. The panel concluded that the original trial had been tainted by prejudice, political hysteria, and a flawed judicial process. Although the panel could not overturn the convictions posthumously, it formally recommended a pardon, acknowledging that the men had likely been innocent of the crimes for which they were put to death. Subscribe to the Autopsy Files for more stories like this.